Hello, everyone, and welcome to Innovating Financial Wellness. We are really delighted to have you with us today. And the purpose of this panel is that we often, in recent years, have explored what financial inclusion means and how innovation and technology have helped drive greater financial inclusion. Today, we'd like to focus on financial wellness and what that means and how it can best be delivered by institutions large and small. So one thing to add is if you do have any questions for our panel, please put them in the chat and we'll do our best to respond to them. But I'd like to start off by asking my panel to introduce themselves. So if we can start with you, Mimi.
Thank you very much, Lisa. Pleasure to be here. I'm the head of partnerships at the Financial Health Network. We're a national nonprofit with the mission to improve consumer financial health. And we have defined financial health as when comes about when your individual daily systems help you build resilience and pursue opportunities over time. And we've created a measurement framework for financial health. It's a composite score of a person's financial life across the categories of spend, save, borrow, and fund.
Thank you, Mimi, for starting us off. And if we could pass to you now, Jeremy, could you tell us a little bit about you?
Sure, thanks, Lisa. And hi, everybody. I'm Jeremy Balkin. I'm head of innovation and strategic digital partnerships for Hsbc. We're a fairly large bank. I'm based in New York. My accent's Australian. And I'm also the author of a few books, which are related to this topic, Investing with Impact, Why Finance is a Force for Good, and Millennialization of Everything, How to Win When Millennials, Unfortunately, Will Rule the World. And great to be here. Thanks.
Thanks, Jeremy. And Ron, can we hear from you now, please?
Sure. I'm Ronald I'm head of aging client services for Wells Fargo. And we're a team that's trying to help the entire enterprise work with our older clients, helping them recognize, report, and respond to potential elder financial abuse, but overall trying to make their older lives the healthiest and financially most beneficial life that they can have.
Thanks, Ron. And can we pass over to you, Annette?
Certainly. I've been, prior to joining MSC as a Senior Vice President of Financial Planning, I provided fee-only financial planning to wealthy folks of Maine, typically through a wealth management department. I was tapped by Machias Savings Bank and invited to join them to provide financial health to employees, businesses, and communities. So we're partnering with Financial Health Network and Mimi Joy and her group to improve the financial health of Mainers.
Thanks, Annette. And finally, Bijon.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Bijon Mehta. I lead the financial services vertical here at Twilio. For those of you who are not familiar with Twilio, we're the world's leading customer engagement platform where we basically help our clients embed communications technology in their web and mobile applications, everything from SMS, voice, chat, video, as well as even email.
Thanks, Bijon. And Mimi, I know you started us off with a description how the Financial Health Network would define what it means to be financially healthy. Can you tell us a little bit about how you work with partners?
Yes. So we do a tremendous amount of research. One of our big projects is the U.S. Financial Health Pulse, where we're measuring financial health across the U.S. at the moment. And we're specifically diving in on COVID and what's happening in people's financial lives as a result of that. In addition to that, we run a member network that Annette has mentioned that the Machias Savings is a member of. And we also run a FinTech accelerator and where we invest in early stage companies called the Financial Solutions Lab that are doing interesting things to solve challenges for consumers, as well as a business consultancy to help organizations with their financial health initiatives.
Thanks, Mimi. And I'm sure we'll come back to some of those activities and points that you raised again. But I thought, Jeremy, we'd start with you next. You know, as a large, very large international provider of financial services, and thinking about some of the goals that Mimi outlined to support greater financial health, can you tell us a little bit about how you support your customers in achieving those goals?
Absolutely, and credit to the work that Mimi mentioned. It's so important, particularly in this pandemic and this world we're living in. So one of the things we did last year, actually, we launched a project called the HSBC Financial Wellness Center here in the US. It was one of the projects that I was most proud of. We did that in partnership with a fintech based out of Washington, D.C. called Everify. Initially, because we recognized that there was a huge gap for financial education, the most basic financial education and literacy here in the US. And you might have heard from my accent that I'm not from the US. So as complex as financial services and consumer finance is for Americans, imagine what it's like for folks that are new to this country, who are immigrants or whose English is a second language, for example. So that gap is tremendous. And we thought there was an opportunity to help do something about it. So we created the HSBC Financial Wellness Center. We launched that in January of 2019. And of course, now we've subsequently updated that entire platform and ecosystem into Spanish, not only in English, we're looking at other languages as well. And unsurprisingly, Lisa, and I'm sure no one will be surprised hearing this, when the pandemic hit, when the lockdown first started, we saw in the first month alone a 3x increase in the number of eyeballs on the Financial Wellness Center when the pandemic started. Obviously, people are interested in things like what's it going to mean for their credit card, access to credit, savings, checking accounts. Banks are going to be closed. You can imagine the anxiety and the fears that folks have just at the most basic level of the financial education pyramid. So we absolutely see this as important. The investment we made in building the Financial Wellness Center, which was really a sort of a side project, has become so much more important now. And I think, it's one thing that's really interesting is it's not only about, in this sort of financial inclusion and financial wellness world, is we all have to kind of do this together because we all share the same customers at the end of the day. And some of those customers share the same challenges. And, frankly, when we lift the knowledge base, everybody benefits, both the customers and indeed the institutions. So we're really proud of that. And I know that my colleagues in other parts of the world have been reaching out to us and me specifically over the last 6 months saying, hey, how do we get a piece of that Financial Wellness Center in this country or that? And we're working with our colleagues globally to help spread the Financial Wellness Center. And we're really proud of what we did.
Thanks for that, Jeremy. It sounds like a great initiative, and particularly as you said during the current crisis, a vital resource for people to find information. Yeah. Ron, turning to you for a sec, you touched on the work that you do at Wells, but could you tell us a little bit more about the particular customer segment that you focus on, which is the aging population? Obviously needs change over time, and that's, given the large demographic shifts across the world, that's an increasingly important customer segment. Can you tell us a little bit about how you support that particular group of customers?
Yes, thanks, Lisa. And one of the things I use as an analogy for this segment is one of the toughest conversations many of us have to have is that taking the keys from that older parent that's reached that point, they're no longer able to drive. But we have innovations now with the self-driving car that eventually that conversation will probably be a lot easier or non-existent in the self-driving car world. Similarly, though, we do reach a point where our financial car keys probably need to be adjusted or taken away. And so we're looking to try to use technology to help our older population continue to be financially secure, financially robust, but also protected. So we're doing things with more tools like biometrics, whether it's facial scans, thumbprints, voice recognition, things that allow that account to stay more secure. We're also encouraging more use of technology to maybe give a second look or duplicate statements, electronic duplicate statements to trusted or what have you. Another thing we would also like to do is think about pre-setting limits, that there are things you normally do, and that limit could be 400 for one individual, it could be 4,000 for another, but knowing that those limits are in place and that if we go above that, there's a question, a call, someone steps in to talk to you. The third thing that's very attractive and we hope exciting are a number of the outside vendors are coming up with systems where they can monitor that older person's accounts across their financial footprint, not just with our company, but all of their financial relationships, and can in real time have an alert that they can put out and say, it could be perfectly fine, but these 3-4 factors all seem to be showing something's amiss. And we're hoping that technology and innovation can help in that respect. And then finally, using our own data that we have of your activities, what you do, what you normally do, and can we use that to look around the corner, perhaps as much to say that less than a scam, but maybe Ron isn't acting the way he normally acts. Maybe he's crossed a threshold. So we think all of these tools can come into play as we work to make that financial lifespan of the older person a safe and secure one.
Thanks, Ron. Those are some fantastic examples of both understanding how a customer's needs might evolve and using technology to help meet those changing needs. And I imagine, Annette, some of that must resonate with you. And from the perspective of a community bank, it would be great to hear about how you're viewing issues around supporting financial wellness for your customer base.
Yes, so the bank is very committed to improving the financial health of Mainers, so much so that our mission and vision is improving the financial health of one employee, one customer, one community at a time. So it's really exciting, and we've aligned our community giving to those nonprofits that help advance that as well. So when we look at our entire programming and our delivery system, we have keyed off Financial Health Network's financial health survey. And we've taken that assessment and with those categories of vulnerable, coping, and healthy, we've designed programs for that. So those who fall into the vulnerable category, we know that they need access to resources. These are resources that we don't readily have available to us, but we know that they exist in the communities that we serve. So we reach out to those organizations and ask, what is it that you do best and how do you help folks? So we have this ability to refer folks in our distinct markets, and they are distinct. We can't say what works in one county will work in another. So we're really just connecting those customers to resources. Secondly, those that are in the coping category, we have partnered with a company called FinTECHTalents, and their product is Envelopes. And it's essentially a budgeting app and tool. And I really shouldn't say tool, it's a program. It's a behavior modification program. And these are for folks who really have issues with cash flow and budgeting. And so what we've done there is that we have dedicated 17 employees who have received their FPQP, essentially a paraplanner certification through the College of Financial Planning. And that bank of employees are available to customers to help them with their budgeting. We've developed 2 programs with that app. First is that self-directed experience, somebody who just can do it on their own. We just call that a simple application. And then there's that secondary, simple with someone. Those are the folks who need the help, the budgeting, just somebody to be there for them on a monthly basis, a check-in, advisory, coaching them along the way. And then lastly, we have the healthy group, the cohort, which really typically have been catered to for decades. These are folks who are somewhat wealthy by Maine standards, and they have access to feeling financial planning. But as they get further along and closer to retirement, the resource that this cohort needs most is access to our referral sources, those centers of influence, a CPA, an attorney, insurance folks, investment advisors, to bring them all together. And that's what we're doing for that cohort. So when we take it collectively, we should be along the spectrum, providing those services that are needed and program that is needed to increase the financial health of Mainers.
Great, thanks for that, Annette. And Bijon, turning to you, I mean, Annette, Mimi, Ron, Jeremy, they've all outlined some, fantastic initiatives aimed at meeting the evolving needs of different groups of people in the economy. As a tech provider, can you share with us some of the ways in which that Twilio helps support these outcomes, helps drive these outcomes through technology?
Sure, no, happy to. And this is something that we've been doing with a variety of organizations even before COVID. If you look at our footprint in financial services, because we are an API-based company, a lot of the challenger banks and fintech companies who are digitally native as an organization have been using Twilio APIs within their offering. A lot of the major challenger banks out of Europe as well as the US, even in Asia as well. So we've been helping organizations build conversations with their customers. And when I think about financial wellness, at the heart of that is building a deeper relationship with your customer, where the financial product is the final end of that sort of engagement. But to get to that point, you need to understand kind of what their situation is, what their aspirations are, what their concerns are, what they're trying to accomplish, whether it's in that moment or over a period of time. And so when I think about that, I think about tools like alerts and notifications, which all of us get, but now organizations are looking to create a deeper level of alerts and notifications. It's not just, hey, your bill is due in 3 days. It's talking about, in the case of an individual that might be in a forbearance situation on their mortgage or on a credit card payment, how to communicate with them in a way that isn't policing them, but it's helping them get back on an economic track that they were on earlier, maybe before COVID or before they lost their job in a scenario before COVID, or just helping to build their credit profile. And so we're seeing organizations not just leverage alerts and notifications to do education, to provide information to their customers, but now they're evolving to conversational chatbots, right, on the website or even off the mobile phone. So now an individual can interact with some basic questions and start to get some information from their financial organization that they work with. We're also now seeing, certainly in the post-COVID world, organizations coming to us and saying, we want to embed video into our application. So if a contact center agent or a relationship banker is dealing with an individual that might be going through a troubling situation, they can simply say, I'm going to send you a link, click on the link, and let's have a video chat. And again, because we're an API-based company, all of that is integrated into that organization's environment. So the look and feel is as if it's coming from that institution. And what it does is it just provides the ability now to create a much closer conversation, because you can now see the individual. And again, the beauty is all of those conversations are recorded and taped and archived, and it's all part of that organization's compliance network. So, we see the continuum from extending alerts and notifications to actually, building engaging face-to-face conversations in a socially distanced environment via video.
Thanks for that, Bijon. And I think that's a great example of how greater engagement and communication with the customer is at the heart of so much of what everyone's trying to do for their customers. Jeremy, turning to you for a sec, can you give us some examples? And I know some of the speakers have already touched on some of ways in which you're leveraging technology to deliver better outcomes for your customers through the financial health platform.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks, Lisa. And if I could just add to something that perhaps Bijon said in the context of how we're responding. If you think through the importance of communication, in the old days it was how we would speak to one another, and now we're using technologies to deliver messages not one-to-one scale. Now I think through in a socially distanced world, where by nature, depending on the state you're in, or the country you're in, or the city you're in, you have to rely on these distributed technologies. And so the thing does, I think, I would suspect everyone watching this has used or felt in some way, shape, or form in their lives. From our perspective, I mentioned the Financial Wellness Center earlier. Obviously, that's been building the capacity for that in a normal world. And obviously now we've seen the benefits of that even more robustly and deeply in this COVID world. But one of the other things we've done is we embedded a system and a way of discovery with our folks, particularly in the frontline servicing customers, called EDRIS, which basically is an acronym that stands for Engage, Discover, Review, Action, and Service. And to give them a robust methodology when they're dealing with customers to make sure that they're solving the right problems, getting to the real needs that the customer has. I know some of the issues mentioned earlier, especially by Ronald, about some of the elderly customers and things like that. We're seeing increasingly with an aging population that these issues are concerning. So in other words, financial wellness goes across the entire age spectrum. It's not just for young. And I apologize if you can hear my young kids making noise in the background. Right on cue.
It just speaks to that way that needs evolve over the course of a lifetime.
And thanks everyone for their patience. 180 days into this lockdown, and accepting the new. Are we living at work or are we working remotely? I don't know. It sort of all feels like the same thing. With that, I'm going to go into mute and happy to take that question a bit later when I have to be quiet.
Yeah, I mean, thanks, Jeremy. We'll come back to you in a second. Ron, I imagine some of that really resonated with you, the ways in which, Bijon outlined that technology could be used to drive greater customer understanding and ultimately meet their needs better. And if you could give us some, and I know you touched on some more examples, some concrete examples of the ways in which innovation is delivering better outcomes for your customers.
Yeah, and what I'd like to do is take us into the future, because there are a number of folks out there that are doing great things with concepts like keystroke analysis, so that we can use that to make sure that is our customer logging in to their laptop and into their account. But they are actually now thinking they can use keystroke analysis to do an early detection of potential health issues. Similarly, there is some view that we can use that with a video, and if some diseases can show up, and then the question would be, is that something where you work that health part into the financial part and getting health and wellness all working together, and having that unit, doctor, financial advisor, all pulling in the same direction. So these are all in the realm of possibility. The other challenge, though, and the possible benefit, though, is as we are in COVID, more isolation puts our older clients in the prime position for those who want to take advantage of them. The idea would be if we can use some of the technology to confirm this is something that is out of the norm for them, where we get to ask extra questions before we send that money to Belarus or whatever strange country that's unusual for that client.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great example of where technology can provide protection as well as detection. So thanks for that, Ron. Mimi, I know that you've worked with some really interesting companies as part of the Financial Health Network, and as this conversation is about kind of needs evolving across the lifetime, and it's obviously aging is an important part of that. But I know that you have worked with some startups that deal with the needs of particular people and their roles in the economy. So maybe you could tell us a little bit about some of that work.
Yeah, and I want to say we work with just a terrific group of organizations, and it's hard to just pick a couple for this discussion. But that being said, I'm going to focus on two of our members. One is a company called Steady. Initially, they created a platform for gig workers to help them find work. And that has expanded not only to help enabling people to just find jobs quickly, but they also are now offering financial advice on how to save money and deals on everything from healthcare plans to tax help. And their initial focus was on millennials, but they find that the folks using the platform span all age spectrums. So even older folks trying to supplement their Social Security or other needs that they might have. And then another organization we work with is called Spring4, and that's a platform that integrates with call centers. So when people call in and they say, look, I'm struggling to pay my credit card bill, the call center rep can leverage the Spring4 platform and help them identify local resources, because oftentimes that consumer is stressed beyond just the needs of the credit card. They might need help with rent assistance, or they have food assistance or other things. And Spring4 connects with local resources where that customer is located and helps connect them to help them meet their total financial needs.
Thanks for that, Mimi. And there certainly are some really interesting fintechs and startups out there who are looking at ways of kind of blending that financial health with physical health and other needs. And I think that's a really, really fascinating set of examples. Turning to Annette and then perhaps to you, Bijon, it seems that fintech companies can play a really important role through partnership and collaboration with established financial institutions. It would be great to tell, for you to tell us a little bit about the role that partners play in helping you meet the needs of your customers.
I'll go ahead and take that. So with the advent of COVID, one of the things that not only our institution is looking at, but I'm certain many are, is that we no longer look at suppliers as vendors. That, kind of has a connotation that you're just a supplier. We're really looking at those folks as partners, those companies that are like-minded, who have a mission and vision very similar to ours, such that they can help move the needle on financial health of our communities, our customers and employees. So when we look at the fintech and those companies that have this within their wheelhouse, we are really looking to those groups that get it. Those groups who understand when we say, what is their financial health score, they understand what we're saying. When we say we want to improve the community as a whole in our giving, those nonprofits are like-minded, and we're getting closer and closer to our giving being on par with our desire to improve the financial health. So it's all about alignment for us, and it's all about making sure fintech, those groups that we choose, are with us. They're rocking in the same swing with us.
And I imagine, turning to you for a second, Bijon, and then over to you, Jeremy, I imagine that partnerships with other innovators play an important role for you as well.
I mean, they certainly do. If you look at the range of companies that we're working with, often what ends up happening is, we'll start working with an early stage fintech company, and then that company strikes a partnership with a major bank. And then all of a sudden they realize under the hood, Twilio components are driving some of that experience. And then that actually morphs into a conversation with that larger financial institution. Because as you know, many organizations, the traditional incumbent players, are working off of 30 to 40-year-old technology. And a lot of those technologies don't have APIs off the back of it. So to build these engaging experiences that Ron's organization or Jeremy's organization are trying to build, there's a lot of challenge from a technology perspective. And so often, we end up being almost like a middleware layer to help in terms of plugging data together and being that interoperable layer that allows those experiences to be created on that last mile. So we work, with a range of companies. Those are your traditional sort of third-party technology vendors that embed Twilio into their digital offering, such as a core banking platform, as well as the more digitally native fintech companies that are increasingly striking partnerships with traditional players.
And I mean, for you, Jeremy, I imagine
Lisa,
oh, sorry, Ron, go ahead. Yes, go ahead.
No, I was just going to blend a little bit of what Annette and Bijon said, because one of the things our technology partnership folks are going to face is that when we talk about the aging people, we have two distinct groups. It's the young old and the old, and you can't have a simple one-size-fits-all technology fix. And when we go to some of the things that Bijon was talking about, if we can make sure we're making that adjustment for that subset of the demographic group, it'll make the technology even better. Thanks. Sorry to interrupt.
No, that was a great point. And I mean, I think it's an important one that aging isn't when you cross a particular line. You know, it also is a process and a long, you know, arc of life. I mean, I know my kids would define that starting as somewhere over the age of 30, but for most of us, it's a little bit later. Jeremy, I imagine, you know, picking up on what Bijon, Ron, and Annette were saying, that role of partnerships probably is important for you as well.
Absolutely, Lisa. And I loved what Annette said around the sort of the vernacular change of vendor to partner. I love that. And in fact, I think if all corporate America did that, I think the whole supplier relationship and partnership relationship and just the way and efficiencies, and it's beautiful. I'm going to take that back to my management team actually this afternoon. And of course it's self-serving because I lead the partnership piece for the bank. And I started this in 2015 when partnerships, indeed, in corporate America, no less in financial services, were not exactly as commonplace or accepted as they are today. And if you think through the importance of why partnerships matter so much, especially now in this 24/7, hyperactive, everything on demand, and COVID world, because it's important, because you've seen digital adoption in some cases, and depending on the industry, jump between 5 to 10 years ahead within months. So all the more reason for corporate America to come to stay up to speed with customer expectations. In many cases, it's life or death. You have to do it through partnership. You have to do it with working with the, you know, just from a communication standpoint to what Bijon does and his firm does. By definition, in the socially distanced world, you have to be partnering. We launched something earlier this year, which again was pre-COVID, but has proven to be very timely beneficial with Google on real-time translation for folks whose English is their second language. You know, of course, in an HSBC case, you know, up to half of our customers here in the US are from another country. So obviously, if you can help bank folks whose English is their second language, we talked before about the piece on financial wellness and more importantly, financial education and inclusion and understanding. You know, these things are really, really important. But if not for the partnership piece, we would never have got these things out of the door. And I think, you know, philosophically, one of the things that I've tried to embed in this firm and often speak to peers about is this sort of what I call the three Bs, if you like. Traditionally, corporate America think about, you know, building everything themselves when it comes to technology. And Bijon made a great point. A lot of the technology stacks of big companies are not fit for purpose or were fit for purpose 10, 20, 30, 40 years ago, which in technology terms is like in a different age than what we are today. And so unless you're a big firm who can spend hundreds of millions of dollars building a new technology stack, which we were able to do that has API connectivity, it's just impossible to compete. But if companies can't build it, then they try to buy something, and often you overpay for something. Actually, the quickest and often most efficient way, even if it's to dip the toe in the water, is to what I call borrow, or, you know, to use Annette's term, partner with someone. It's often the best, most efficient way with the lowest lead time, the lowest opportunity cost, the most efficient. You can partner with world-class technology companies, you know, like what Bijon does in the speed of getting to market with the world's leading services. And frankly, corporate America should be much more open to partnership. And I think COVID, one of the things I've seen with the COVID lockdowns for other firms has frankly been this recognition that we just can't wait anymore. And whether it's under the guise of this sort of siege mentality, we have to just innovate quickly. And so they've had to sort of remove a lot of the roadblocks traditionally to partnerships or to getting things done or do things quickly to speed up, you know, vendor management processes. You know, I could tell you a million war stories that I've heard from folks and friends and folks at competitors. That's a good thing, but it can't end when COVID ends. It actually needs to become the norm. Mm-hmm. And that's what companies need to do, and partnership is absolutely the way to do it.
I'd interject here because one of the things and one of the challenges I would say that not just our bank faces in Maine, but all of the banks in Maine face is that number one, we are the oldest state in the nation per capita. So I can appreciate when Ron said we are talking about two age groups, younger and older, because that we are facing that. But secondly, we are a group of people. We're 2 million strong in over a very large area. We have technology access issues. Just the infrastructure access to the internet is a challenge for us. So that's number one. Number two, we still have customers that are using text balance programming. So you just 5949 BAL and they get their balance. And so we are having a challenge kind of weaning people off that old technology for the new technology. That being said, we've had a really good adoption rate for digital banking, et cetera. Our drive-through transactions have leveled off even while opening up the branches. The one thing that I am faced with that I'm trying to figure out is Mainers are stubborn. We like what we do and we do what we know. So if we adopted a technology 10, 15 years ago, we know it like the back of our hand, we're comfortable with it. How do we then shift that behavior and adoption of new technology? And that's the challenge. And we will adopt as Mainers, and particularly aging Mainers, if it's happening without us knowing it's happening. So how can this group, and I'll speak to you, Bijon, how can technology impact my daily use of technology and advancing it without me knowing it?
That's a great point. And one of the things that I say to people, when I joined Twilio, everyone was like, what's Twilio and what do they do? And I said to people, you're probably using Twilio and you don't even know it, right? So if you've taken an Uber or a Lyft, all of the text messages, the phone conversations between you and your driver or your driver and you are all powered by Twilio, right? When you now go to Target to do the the curbside pickup, that communication that says, oh, I'm here outside, please come with my delivery, that's powered by Twilio. And what that does is it provides like this little connection point in someone's mind as to kind of at a very practical level what we as a company do. Because APIs are hard even for people in the industry to wrap their hands around, because you can't touch it and see it. You can't drop it on someone's desk. It's code. But when you explain the experience, when you explain the benefit that you get, then it becomes a little bit more real.
And Mimi, I think you wanted to jump in there because I think this really points, everything, and I'll go back to you in a sec, Ron, that everyone's described around the power of partnership, the need to accelerate, the need to view those partners as getting you to where you need to be as quickly as possible. And obviously COVID has just accelerated a lot of that dynamic. Point to the role that you have in convening that community of innovators.
Right. So we really do behave in that, we want to be a convener to bring technology companies, financial service organizations, other nonprofits all together to really solve this challenge around consumer financial health, which has just been laid wide open with COVID, right? We know a huge proportion of Americans are stressed financially and actually around the world. And getting back to the whole tech stack discussion, we've recently published some research about how the older tech stacks can really limit and inhibit innovation that helps actually promote financial health. And then on the external side of that is just, understanding the challenges in the ecosystem that Annette has raised, like, what does it mean when everything becomes digital and you are on a limited data plan or an older cell phone, and this is your only way to connect with your financial life, right? And how do you promote financial health in a situation like that? When resources are scarce or just even compromised because you can't walk into a branch or, some other method.
Yeah, just sorry, Ron, turning to you.
Again, I would look at this, I keep focusing on the older client, but it really is the family. It is that daughter in Florida who can't get back to Maine, but can we use technology to keep her mom connected with the financial institution so that they're all working together, one, to protect from the potential scams and abuse, but two, to make sure that mom is having her best financial self each day in connection with her bank or a brokerage institution.
And Lisa, may I just jump in? Just tying in something from Annette's perspective, Bijon and Ronald as well, and actually Mimi as well. If you think through historically, just habit formation and new behavior formation, the old adage, it takes 21 days to form a habit. That which on average, and this was probably by the most comprehensive study in Europe on this from the European Journal of Social Psychology, it says on average it takes 66 days to form a new habit. Obviously the easy habits take less, but the harder ones take more, but on average, so 66 days is about 10 weeks. Here in New York, we're well over 150 days in lockdown. Maybe it's closer to 180 by now. I've lost count. The point being is I'm at least twice through that cycle, if not 3 times. So there are patterns of behaviors, work, consumer, human, etc., that I've formed that will be very difficult to unform later. And I'm not the only one. There are billions of people around the world dealing with this, millions in America in particular. So if you think through from a financial services perspective, I think to Annette's point, and to Mimi's in some respects, if you're a branch dependent or if you're traditionally been a branch customer, and then all of a sudden you couldn't visit a branch because of the lockdown, and then for the first time you had to use your desktop digital login or indeed your mobile credentials, and then you did that for the first month, the second month, the third month, maybe the branches opened up in the 4th month. Who's to say you were going to ever go back to that physical channel? So the point is, clearly there's going to be some systemic and indeed structural changes to consumer behaviors when this ends. In addition to the trust element of consumers or indeed workers wanting to go back to a physical environment, whether that's to consume or to work. And so technology is going to have to play a much, much larger role than ways we've even thought of, to not only to rebuild trust, but to facilitate that physical and digital experience going forward. And I think that's why this is so important. And partnership is absolutely the way it's going to happen, because big companies have got so much, sort of BAU things to deal with in whatever the industry, that the technology, the R&D, the innovation is coming at the intersection and working with, whether it's fintech or other tech, large or small, to help move corporate America forward. It is absolutely essential, and candidly, from a resilience and a risk management standpoint, in a COVID and post-COVID world, it's going to become table stakes.
Yeah, no, I think you've tied that together really nicely, Jeremy. And unfortunately, I could talk about this all afternoon, but we only have a few minutes left. So I wondered if, if you all wanted to kind of give us some closing thoughts on what you think the potential is for technology to support greater financial wellness, financial resilience, and all the good things that Mimi and the other panelists have outlined. Shall we start with you, Bijon?
Happy to. I think ultimately, as I was saying earlier, it all comes down to how you build a relationship between the institution and the individual. And increasingly, organizations need to meet the customer over the channel of their choosing. You can have someone that's 70 and loves to text message. You can have someone that's 40 and maybe still wants to deal with someone for certain types of issues. The challenge for organizations over the next several years is building those omni-channel capabilities so that irrespective of how I as an individual want to do my banking, I can do it, and do it in a way that affords me the most efficient way to get those services. And that's the organization that's going to win my business. So if you're in an institution right now and you're looking at financial wellness in a modest sense, or even in a more specific sense, as I run the credit card business and I want to make sure my customers are looked after. Every line of business leader needs to be thinking about how do I connect with the customer in a to interact with me.
Thanks. And I'll pass over to you, Ron. Do you have any closing ideas around the kind of prospects for something good coming out of this crisis in terms of your customers?
No, I think there's great potential coming out of the crisis in terms of using technology, using innovation to make a world that's better. The one chair that's missing from our group, however, is our regulators. We need to, and that mentioned the partnership, we need them into the partnership fold as well. When that conversation starts, I don't know, but probably the earlier the better.
That's a great point. And over to you, Annette.
Yeah, the good news is the trust factors in a community bank exists. So people trust their community banks and their community bankers. So we can capitalize on that as a vetting resource for technology. So if we offer it to our customers, they trust that it's going to be good for them, and they trust that it's it's safe, right? The bad news is that we're a community bank. And community banks tend to have legacy technology, and we move slowly back to we like what we do and we do what we know. So where technology will play a role in this for community banks, thus the customer and the consumer, will be to make that technology seamless and under the radar. We don't know it's happening, and that's where the win will be.
Great. And Mimi, any final thoughts?
Right. So I think we often talk about democratizing access to financial services, sort of a catchphrase these days, and how the innovators are really leading the charge. But I think, based on everybody's comments there, those legacy tech systems really can present challenges. If you want to partner or integrate, they really can sort of inhibit the ability to bring these new services, especially in the banking ecosystem, to market. And that's where the role of Twilio and others are so important to create that connective layer. But until that's really solved, I think there will be continuing to be friction, in terms of just driving innovation.
Jeremy, I wondered if you had any final thoughts.
I would just simply say that consumer expectations have changed, and this is the reality we live in, and technology is going to have a much larger role to play with all of us. And financial wellness in some ways is not only critically important, but as we increasingly are living a digital world, mobile device, access to the mobile is just as important as access to financial services, as increasingly financial services become digitized. So I think that's just something that financial health needs to consider as we think about this issue. Is it has to be delivered by a mobile device, and if a mobile device is indeed the critical access point rather than, say, traditionally having a branch is, then it changes the whole paradigm of how we think about financial wellness going forward.
Great, thanks for that, Jeremy, and thank you to the panel. It's been a fantastic discussion. There's so much that I know that we could have discussed, and picking up on Ron's point, next time maybe we'll include someone from the regulator on this session. So thanks again, everyone, and to everyone listening, please put your questions into the chat. We're just about to take a break on the main stage, so go stretch your legs, have some coffee, and don't forget to visit the interactive sessions, which are running all afternoon. And we will see you back here on the main stage at 3:45, where we'll have a session looking at the way that regulators are grappling with crypto assets. So thank you again to my panel, and speak to you all soon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.